Maybe let's start off with a general question. For people who aren't familiar with the Latrobe Valley Authority, how does it work? What do you do?
So we're a state administrative authority that was established in early 2017. So we're a public service. We are a government agency made up of a team of both experienced public servants, but also a majority of our staff are local people who we've employed, and that's really important. So a team of people who live here, who are committed here, including myself. So except for a couple of Melbourne-based people, the majority of us live here. This is our community, and that makes a big difference to the work that we do and how we do that work. So we've had a 4-year program of work, which has basically been about immediate response, recovery, and then longer term transition around sustainability and setting up the community for long-term prosperity. That's the real name of the game at the moment. So as an authority, one of the really important aspects of our development was the ability to be responsive and make local decisions in a way that perhaps other government agencies haven't been able to do. So getting the authority from state government to do that was really important, and having funds and the ability to make those local decisions based on what's needed at the time, driven by local people. Yes, working for a government agency, but basically we were a group that looked at the very complex and comprehensive idea of what it means for community transition with an industry transition right on the doorstep. So it is about support for workers, support for business, support for community, and all of that entails alongside, livability, infrastructure, services, having a look at what currently exists. So really undertaking a context analysis to understand the current state of play, but really working closely with all of those groups to understand what matters to people, really understand what matters to people. So the approach we've taken is not to have a plan up front.
Yeah.
Our approach was to really understand our community at that point of time and what the future held, and to work with all of those groups, including local government, higher ed and training, businesses, workers, community groups, policy people, across state government departments, federal government, to understand first the context, and then to say, well, where are the opportunities here and how do we work together on that? So taking a role in bringing people together, facilitating, bringing collaboration together, helping people understand the evidence around decisions, but really, governance and leadership, and making sure we set the conditions up for, system work and innovation. And we did a fair bit of work on trying to understand what contemporary regional development looks like at an international level. So we've drawn on some international best practice here, and understanding what the conditions are required for that, for regions that are doing well despite industry transition.
Yeah.
And so we've learnt from those places and taken that to think about what that looks like at a local level here.
It's a really different role for a government organisation to play that level of analysis, to work out what the situation is, to be bringing people together and coordinating that, and actually then putting ideas forward. It's not what we normally see these days, but it's really, to have that in a place-based context would be a real advantage, I imagine. So what?
So I think one of the parts about that, Amanda, I think it's a really important point, is the ability to do some quick work, and I think that's important here. So what do you do in the first 12 months, 2 years, 5 years on closure of any industry that's transitioning, that has a big impact in a community? So preparing for that. And how do you do some immediate recovery work post that? If you've got time, you can do that really well. But I think the bigger story is what does the community see for its future, and how does it view that, and what do you draw on? What expertise and knowledge do you draw on what leadership, what collaboration needs to take place. And again, I'll come back to the point, what have we learned about or can learn about places that are doing well despite those challenges? And how do you make sure that those conditions are put in place?
Yeah, because often we look at the bad examples, like how do we not do that instead of actually looking at what does work.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what are some of the, I guess, limitations of the model that you're using? Where are you constrained?
I think there are some constraints, and not initially. It depends on where an organisation like us sits within the public service. And so one of the things that we have learnt is that we do really need the authority to be locally driven, to be able to make local decisions, and not be too constrained by the bureaucracy of what can be in the public service. And so we understand that really well, because we've shifted in the public service, and that's played out a bit. So I think if it is going to be a government agency, I think then those conditions need to be set from the start if you want it to be successful. But the benefits of being a government agency with a different remit is that we have some level of independence, and it's not, we can take a broader backbone approach here, which is not any individual stakeholder group dominating the play. And I think you need a level of independence here, because industry on its own can't do this. Neither can local government, neither can community groups, neither can researchers and training. Those sectors actually have to come together and collaborate for working on what are the strengths of the region, how can you position it for what that future looks like, what's going to be special about this location that you can really build on, what's the expertise you currently have that you can think about applying that in, beyond the current industry model. There are strengths in a community. So what are they, and how do you bring those stakeholders together to work in a collaborative way on that? So that sort of, we've been able to do that with a level of independence. And
so you've kind of got the independence with the authority, and then how does it work? Do you have a community reference group or like a board, or how do you bring those different players together?
So we deliberately didn't go down that path, because that's quite a traditional path in believing that you can have a board that's going to represent all of the work, and it falls into the trap of anointed people. We haven't gone that way. We've actually gone a very different way, and that's about working with workers, businesses, training and higher ed and local government in focusing on what needs to be done and forming governance arrangements around that.
Okay, so for specific pieces of work, you form different groups to tackle different parts of the puzzle.
That's right, and different levels. So that can be, at a 3 local government area, where we've done work with 3 local governments on support for small business, for instance. That's been fantastic, because that was a gap and an opportunity. We've done work with 6 local governments now on local procurement. So how do you actually grow spend and contracts for local workers and local businesses? So there's an agreement between 6 local governments now on that. And so we've done work on strengthening one of the employment areas of growth, which is in health, and we brought a whole lot of governance arrangements around that, which included local government and industry and training and policymakers. So these are quite bespoke, and they're for a purpose. But we also then, at another level, work directly with CEOs and mayors of local government about common things. So it really is fit for purpose governance arrangements. And then we've got quite local work being done on looking at opportunities in renewable energy, on opportunities in tourism, where you bring other people together in a different way. We work with peak bodies, and they represent those industries. It's so you work with the agencies that actually exist the job is to bring collaboration around the agencies that currently exist. So you're not creating another layer.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really that coordination and facilitation role. It's connecting,
Yes.
it's looking ahead,
Yes.
it's identifying what the issues are, bringing the right people together at the right time, and having the resources to be able to respond as things come up.
And them making the decisions, Amanda. So it's not going to a board to be ticked off. It's a governance arrangement where those people, depending on what it is they're working on and who comes to the table, make those decisions. And we can seed fund some of those. But quite often what happens is you'll get industry, you'll get local government, you'll get us coming to the table and maybe some other players. And what happens when it's really important, people invest. So it's not reliant just on state government funding then.
Yeah.
And that's the other benefit of the approach.
So I guess I'm wondering then how the experience with the announcement around your lawn has been different to the announcement of Hazelwood shutting, which was really when Latrobe Valley Authority got started, was around the Hazelwood back in end of 2016, the announcement came.
Yes,
and then
yes.
shut in March 2017. Can you just reflect a bit on the difference now with having had the authority in place for the last 4 years?
Well, I think the short notice brings a whole lot of challenges, which was, having to turn our minds really quickly to supporting workers in the first instance, individual workers personally, and making sure that we looked after people and families. So that was a really important work. And we did that in partnership with the unions, with some training organisations. And again, it was paying attention to what those workers and families needed. So developing support around what was needed in partnership with those agencies. I think that will still have to be done, but the lead time is great then to really understand what individual workers and their families are looking for into the future.
So how long have you got? Is it 7 years? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've already started working with Energy Australia on starting to think about that and what that looks like and what we've learnt. And so that's going to be really helpful to do that carefully. Not that we did not carefully, but I think with hindsight and more time, we can probably really improve on that. Businesses, again, supply chain directly for a power station. What's going to happen to those particular businesses who've probably had contracts for a long time with that energy company? How do we help them to adjust and look for other contracts or think differently about their business model? So it's working with businesses directly impacted, and then there's the sort of the further business discussion about people being worried about what's going to happen to their local business, their local cafe, their local, any other business who sees that a big industry in their community, and the other things that play out for local businesses is the other broader part of that. And I think then for training and skills, one of the things that has really come out of this is that our training organisations who have been geared up for a fairly stable economy for a long time, we've got to work really hard with them to understand what are the new skills required and how do we work with them to adjust their courses and training around what the future is going to be for our community. We've already started that work quite seriously now. So we've been able to influence, courses in bioenergy, courses in solar installations, new health roles, tourism, really starting to understand what that future is by working with those peak bodies and being engaged in some collaborative work and funding some of those things, Amanda, which is what you need.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So I guess then what advice, like, to the people watching this in central Queensland as they're still trying to figure out how to move forward and what good coordination would look like, what advice would you give them based on the last 4 years of your experience?
The first bit is that we need to celebrate and understand and be respectful of the past and the current community, and really celebrate the skills and what the community has brought to the well-being and the social and economic conditions over time. That's been really important to acknowledge that and recognise that there are a lot of strengths in the community that need to be recognised and understood. That's the first bit of advice, I think. But also, I think the second part is how do you assist people to understand that there is a future, that this is not all doom and gloom. And really, at the end of the day, the future is in a community's hands with support. And if we live in the past and stay in the past, that's where we will stay. And I think it's also understanding that as a community where I live, we do live in a state, national and international environment now, and we need to understand that, but also see it as a place for opportunity. And I think the last part is to have a really disciplined way about understanding where the opportunities are that are based on evidence. Really strong evidence base, because that's what will bring investors, not just people's good ideas or opinions.
Yes, there's always a lot of those. Well, thank you for your time, and people will be hearing more from you actually at the summit in live version rather than the video, but thanks for making the time to do the video today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Amanda.